My name is Danielle, and I'm here to just narrate a story for you. And my question for you is, who narrates your story? So, like Melissa said, I'm originally from Oakland, California. I actually grew up with a single mom. There were 4 of us. So you can imagine growing up in East Oakland, the narrative that people had about who I would be, what I would be, and how I would be. I'm one of those people that I like to prove people wrong, though, so just a little bit, or a lot. I ended up moving to Northern California, to the Sacramento area. And growing up, I always had a defense mechanism. So those things to me were, find something that I could identify with, that would define me, and stick to those things. I'm a very analytical thinker. I love science. In fact, I'm a science nerd. I'm a science fanatic still. I still take continuing medical units, and I don't even work in the field anymore. So that should tell you. I learned to be very unapologetic for who I was, and I still am very unapologetic for who I am. And I was an athlete, so being an athlete, being a science nerd, and being unapologetic were all things that defined me. That was how I narrated my story. I was in college, graduated early. I was 17 actually when I went to college. First semester I did amazing, right? Because at 17 you can't do anything and you still have a curfew. Next semester though, I turned 18 and I ended up majoring in dominoes at that point. So I figured, there was something else that I had to do, and so I decided actually that day that I was going to enlist in the United States Air Force. I ended up going to my best friend's house afterwards because I was a little bit afraid of going to my mom's house and tell her I was about to leave. But we went together, and much to the surprise of my family, I enlisted, and they honestly didn't think I would do it. Once I enlisted, I actually had my dream job. I was a medical lab technologist or clinical lab technologist, and I loved it. I could tell you cells like nobody's business. I could help to define what microbiology entity was harming somebody. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. When it came to chemistry calculations, I could do them in my sleep. Remember, I was a science nerd beforehand. That actually helped me to get that job. And I considered myself an intellectual. I always considered myself a strong person too. We heard Michelle earlier say, there's those 3 B's that we are in the military. I did not want that to be my story. So I picked some other words, some other, adjectives. So I was an intellectual, I was strong, and I was not going to be that stereotype. But I'm sure that people thought that I was one of those words. I was often referred to by students after they passed my class as Mama Marshall, and they would say, "Oh, don't suit, Mama Marshall's coming." So I'm sure, one of those words, they assumed that's what I was. I absolutely loved what I did, loved it. Then I was injured in the line of duty. I had some pain, and like the military does most of the times, I had a handful of pills to take, because that's usually how, Motrin can cure anything. I had a ton of back pain and didn't realize what was going on. It wasn't until 2 years later that I was sitting at a microscope and my left leg started going numb. So many emotions passed through at that time, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened? I then found out that a career that I had planned to have for 20 years was essentially about to be over through no fault of my own, which, it is what it is. I had so many questions. Who am I? What am I? How am I going to narrate my story now? So the narrative that I've been telling myself and I've been telling the world is now over. Then they started throwing around these phrases, disabled, you have disabilities now, or you're going to do this, or you're going to do that. I honestly didn't even want to tell people I was a veteran when I got out, because I was, a little ashamed, a little embarrassed, and I didn't want anybody to think I was weak. Remember, one of my adjectives was that I was a strong person and I was an intellectual. So I kind of covered it up as best as I could. And then I realized that I still had a heart for service. I was a business consultant for years. Found out that analytical side of me always wanted to put things and people together. I got an opportunity to be in the fashion industry for a while, and I did business consulting. I wrote training programs. I helped with benefits, incentives, and different things like that. And I did that well, but there was always still something else that I thought was missing. So earlier, you also heard about the TAPS program. All my military people, raise your hand. Who went through TAPS? Who thought they were able to present themselves to the best of their ability once they finished TAPS? Raise your hand. So that was my story. That was that narrative. I was told I needed a brown suit, a black suit, and a gray suit. And I needed to make sure my hair stayed pulled back. I needed to make sure I always wore closed-toed shoes. And I was like, okay, because I didn't know. I had been in this uniform for so many years that having a personal style, a personal narrative, I didn't know what that was anymore. Or maybe I thought I didn't really know what that was anymore. So I went to my first job interview, and I remember getting the job, and afterwards sitting, with coworkers, and they started laughing, and I was like, well, what's so funny? I ended up going back in the lab for a very short minute as an instructor, but they said, oh my gosh, when we first met you, we thought you were so stuck up and rigid. You came in here in your fitted black suit, and we were like, oh my God, is she gonna make it? And I'm like, well, that is so not me. So that was the narrative that they were saying. So let's fast forward a bit. When I was finishing my MBA, I decided to take some time off and take all fashion courses, so history of fashion, textiles, and everything else in between. And I realized that I really had a love for this industry. I had a love for style, not necessarily trends, and I wanted to help other people to put that story together, specifically veterans. Because remember, we're in that uniform for so long, that becomes so much a part of our identity that we don't know how to present that when we're out of that uniform anymore. So I founded Style to Profession several years ago. In fact, Lydia Davies here, she did my website, and it was so interesting when I was working with her because she was asking me what my narrative is. I'm very analytical, like I said, I'm a science nerd, so I was very into the business side of it, and she was like, no, but what are you trying to say? What are you trying to do? What is it that you want? And I'm like, that's kind of interesting, so thank you for that. But I still had a heart for service. I still needed a purpose. I had a need that I need to have filled, or I had to fill that need for somebody else. People don't know all the time that they're not able to navigate through the style world or the professional world with a sense of style, because style is inherent. Everybody has a style. For some of us in the military, we actually revert to a style from when we first got in the military. Can you imagine that? So if you went in the 80s, and I promise you it's true, guess what happens now when you retire? We still have mullets. We still have, was it Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? Was that 80s or 90s? I don't remember. But those t-shirts still come out. 90s, we had cross colors and bell bottoms, and I kid you not, there are people who went in the 90s that is still their wardrobe. So I became an entrepreneur, launched a company, and it is now my mission to make sure that people's personal style and professional message are one consistent conversation, one consistent narrative. So what's my narrative now? Actually, this, I gotta tell you, these were actually all veteran women. So Ivy was prior Navy, Melissa's Army, Kim's Air Force, Jackie's Marines, and Severine's Army. And so we did this huge thing for a local news station. It was probably the most hilarious things because they took pictures of everybody, and everybody had on black shirts, flip-flops, and jeans. So my narrative now, I'm a wife. I'm a mother of two amazing boys. Actually, this is about a year and a half older because the older one is now 6 feet tall, and the little one's almost my height. I served in the Air Force, the United States Air Force. I am a disabled veteran, and I'm okay with that. I'm a business owner, and I'm so very proud to be all those things and everything else. So my question to you today is, who narrates your story? What is your narrative? Thank you so much for having me out today, and I'll talk to you guys after.